Several months ago I decided I would start video recording my explorations of the historical and conflict gaming hobbies, whether it's hex encounters like we have here, or miniatures and rulers, or even pixels and keyboards. This is another video in that ongoing documentary. This is the Battle of Patay from the game Henry V. 4 Battles from the 100 Years' War by Rob Markham, 3W game, published in 1993. What we have here to play, the armies are set up per the scenario instructions. I have my ammunition record sheets for the French and the English, which also has demoralization levels for the commands on them, broken up by the 4 battles: Agincourt, Formigny, Castillon, and Patay. So I put those off to the side, and I will definitely be using the ammunition record and replenishment rules. My idea is to play the archers very aggressively and see if these ammunition record rules, how they actually work in practice. Have the rule booklet. The way this is they're very concise isn't the right word. It's a very lackadaisical writing style, but the
rules are basically written in a very sparse manner. Okay, so there are at least a half a dozen clear ambiguities, gaps, what have you. I'm not going to dwell on those here. I'm just going to try to, as a matter of fact, I'll probably just skip over them all and go with what I've interpreted to be the rules and what they were intended. So you have the rules up front, and then you have a rules section for each of the battles. So we've set up Patay here. We have the demoralization levels listed here, but they're also shown as the boxes on the ammunition record sheets. We have that special rule for Joan of Arc. She positively influences morale ratings of units nearby her, and units must check for morale if Joan of Arc is eliminated. Then we have our victory tables. This will last 11 turns. We will add up the points for each side, subtract the English victory point total from the French victory point total to determine whether we have anything from a French major victory to an English major victory. All right, let's get started. Oh, also have on the back of the rules are the range table and fire table, but so I can just use the rules for looking up rules. I went ahead and photocopied the back page, so I have a separate range table, fire table. I have a melee table, a unit type modifier table, and then the terrain effects chart. So these are handy as well, left in hand's reach. All right, starting beginning of turn 1. Basically, there's an initial command phase where each of these commands or formations are given a starting order. Before I zoom in a little bit, we have the whole map here. Again, there is no north seeking arrow, so I'll just be going with top of the map, bottom of the map, left of the map, and right of the map. We basically have this low terrain here. It slopes up on the left and it slopes up on the right. A few roads. We have this long hedge. Hedgerow. And that's about it that's going to affect anything. All right, so starting orders. Basically, the English each have a stand order. So here are the commanders. Here's Talbot commanding the front line, basically behind the hedgerow. His formation has a stand order. Actually, I was going to change this. There we go. All right. Talbot's formation has a stand order. So right behind him is the stand order chit. Playing face to face, you can definitely put the orders underneath the leader counters. Put them underneath like that, because you don't have to show your orders to the opponent. But playing solitaire, I like to just put them behind the leader anyways. And then Falstaff, Fastolf is in command of the rear line, which is up here on the ridge, I guess you'd say, up on level 2 terrain. Gave them a stand order as well. Basically, they each have stand orders. In this game, you can choose your initial order. Some of the games in the series give a starting order that you may use. In this game, you choose your first order. I gave them both stand orders because if the English army comes out from behind this defensive terrain, they'll be at a significant disadvantage. On the French side, basically I have 4 formations, kind of in a diamond pattern here. The lead formation is La Hire. I gave him an advance order, and I gave Dunois over here an advance order, as well as Richemont in the rear here also has an advance order. So basically, these formations are going to slowly move forward to begin putting pressure on the English left, while I gave Alençon on the French left an attack order. So this formation on the left is going to try to get around this English flank, and the rear battle or formation back here, Richemont will decide to go left or up the center or right, depending on which of these formations has the most progress against the English. So we have advance, 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 attack, stand, stand. Those are the initial orders. We place those orders chits, or command chits. Now we go to the command change phase for the French. They're not going to change because these are the starting orders, but in the future this would be when the French would try to change their orders. Then we go to the French player movement phase. First you check to see if anybody's out of command. Obviously they're not out of command because they set up in command, but we'll check that in the future. If we find units out of command, we will mark them as out of command. Out of command means outside the leader's command radius. So Alençon over here has a good 6. That's above average. La Hire has an average 5. Dunois has an average 5. And Richemont has a little bit below average 4. On the English side, they're both 5s. 5 for Talbot and 5 for Fastolf. Okay. French player then moves all of his eligible units that he desires to move. So now is basically when it all comes down to what the order is for the formation. That will tell you what you can and have to move. So we'll just go in order. We have 3 advance orders, right? Commands, 3 advanced commands. So we'll go over advance first. And the best thing that could be done with this series is to do a player aid card or cheat sheet that summarizes all of these rule stipulations for each command. So for advanced command, all combat units in command using the advanced command chit may move up to their full movement allowance during the movement phase. They must end their turn 1 hex closer or remain adjacent to an enemy combat unit. Basically, they can move up to their full movement allowance, but they must end their move at least 1 hex closer to an enemy, or if they're already adjacent to an enemy, they will stay adjacent. They will end adjacent. And there's no melee combat die roll modifiers for having an advanced command. So basically move at least 1 hex closer to the enemy, up to full movement allowance. So they're going to do that. They're just going to move 1 hex. They're going to use this command to just move one hex for now. And advance, and so here they have all ended 1 hex closer to the enemy. That was kind of their minimum move for the advance command. So then over here with the attack command, it's more significant. So here the attack command is all combat units in command using the attack command chit must move at least half their movement allowance rounded up and must end their movement closer to enemy units than they began. Combat units with attack command receive a +1 die roll modifier in melee. Combat units adjacent to enemy combat units must perform combat, either fire and or melee. Heavy cavalry units have special abilities. So Alanson does have heavy cavalry, so he'll be looking to use that later. Okay, units with an attack command that are not adjacent to an enemy unit at the beginning of the combat phase may advance 1 more hex at the conclusion of the combat phase. Wow. I never noticed that rule right there. Okay. May advance 1 more hex at the conclusion of the combat phase. All right. Well, we're showing the movement phase. So these guys all need to move a minimum of 1/2 their movement allowance rounded up and closer to the enemy. So they don't want to delay though. They're going to get right into the fight here. So crossbowmen, although it's not going to be pretty, crossbowman is going to go 1, 2, 3 because they have a movement allowance of 3. The men-at-arms, French men-at-arms here, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So they all moved their full movement allowance, and heavy cavalry is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I was looking at this earlier. Here's the road, and there are times when, I think, well, it looked to me like there were times when if you're trying to do a minimum move, you would not want to use the road terrain rate, which is 1/2 point, as opposed to 1 for the clear hex. And the way I read the very, terse rules, it sounds to me like you're not forced to take the road rate. So you could basically move 1 hex from one road hex to another road hex, but spend the movement points for clear terrain, not road terrain. Again, there are times when you want to do a minimum move and you want to stay in formation. That's how I read it anyways. That's the French player movement phase. Now we go to French player combat phase. Defensive fire. All non-phasing units that have enemy units within their range may fire. And we have at least some because these French units have moved within range of this longbowman and this longbowman here. So let's do some defensive fire. All right, so here's a longbowman. Longbows fire at 3 hex range, so this longbowman can decide to fire at any of these. He will go ahead and fire at the stacked units. 1, 2, 3, which is maximum range. So, there are no terrain effects because it's just clear. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the range table first. We're going to find longbow. We're going to go across in range of hexes. At 3 hexes away, longbows fire on column B. Come down here to the fire table. The fire table has columns A, B, and C, and die roll. And in this game, I don't see any die roll modifiers. I think in some games there are. But let's yeah, I don't see any. So the longbowmen fire on column B against that stack of men-at-arms. Now, does the unit type modifier table apply? I think it only applies to melee. To use the unit type modifier table, wow. They call this an optional rule. I have no idea why you would not want to play with it. Before resolving melee combat, compare the type of unit attacking with the type of unit defending. The result is a die roll modifier for the attacking unit. Okay, it looks like that's just for melee, so they're just, I don't see any modifiers. What I'm getting at is I guess the men-at-arms don't get any advantage over being fired at as compared to, these crossbowmen or infantry over here. So the English longbow roll, they roll a 10. Oh, wait a minute. Something isn't right here. Because this table, this die roll table, goes from 0 to 11 plus. So where that certainly implies that there are modifiers. Huh. Oh, okay. Because of terrain. Okay. All right. There are terrain modifiers to fire combat. Okay. Funny they don't mention that on the table though. No, I don't see it. All right. Yep. Wow. So they got a 10, which is very, very good. That is 1. That is so the top unit in the target hex suffers a step loss, and then everybody checks morale. So this is how we do that. First, we'll figure out how many steps the man-at-arms has. Is it 2? I think it's 2. So we'll just double check real quickly. Steps. The games in the series use a slightly different model for strength and step losses. So all combat units with a reverse side, as he has, have 2 possible steps to lose. Units with no reverse side are eliminated by a single step loss. But heavy cavalry is slightly different. Heavy cavalry looks like they have 3 steps. So, but in any case, the men-at-arms here have 2 steps. So I flip the top one over, and stacking here matters, by the way. As far as I understand the rules, stacking matters in that it is when they say the top unit, they mean physically the top unit, which means that you can't shuffle units around. Well, actually that's just implied. I don't know. It seems like it's implying when you start out, the top unit's the top unit because losses are going to be taken from top unit down or something like that. Like I said, not crystal clear. So the English rolled a 10. So now the morale of the reduced men-at-arms is now down to 5. So he is going to roll against his morale first, and then the still full strength unit under him will roll. So the top unit has a morale of 5, and he rolled a 6, so he fails his morale. To check a morale, roll a die, subtract 1 from the result if a leader is stacked with the combat unit, and compare the result to the combat unit's morale rating. Our guy here has a 5, but he rolled a 6. If the die roll is equal to or less than the morale rating, the combat unit has passed its morale check. If the die roll is higher, the combat unit routes. A route marker is placed upon it, and it is retreated 3 hexes by the owning player. 1, 2, 3. What a route. Route marker on there. Actually, he goes there. He's going 3 back. 1, 2, 3. But he's choosing to try to stay within the command span of his leader here. So now the next guy below him, who has a full strength morale of 7, he rolls a 5, he passes. So what happened here is that this was a forced unstacking. 1 man-at-arms was reduced, so he has lower values and is routed 3 hexes back. The other guy stays in place because he passed his morale check. That was the first longbow attack of the defensive fire phase. And we have one other longbowman over here. He's going to choose. I think he only has 1 target. This longbowman right here. 1, 2, 3. He's firing at the stack with the leader a little higher. Same column B. Oh, he rolled a 3, so that he misses. Not good enough to get a hit. So they just miss completely. That is the end of the defensive fire phase because there are no other eligible shooters with a target in range. Now we go to, and now, so that was long range fire. That should be regular arrows. So take a look at the actual designations. So we have English P. Look right here. There's English P. And I'm going to fill in the first regular arrow box. A dry erase marker. And then the other one was English T. English T will have the same thing done. Dry erase marker. All right. Yeah, so specifically, ammunition after each unit fires, the owning player should check off one of the unit's ammunition supply boxes on the ammunition supply sheet for the scenario. When all ammunition supply boxes are checked off, the unit is out of ammunition and may no longer fire. There's a rule for resupply for bows, longbows, and crossbows, but not others. And we have rules for different longbow units having regular arrows and sheaf arrows. But sheaf arrows are used when firing at 1 hex range. So since these were both at long 3 hex ranges, I knew they were regular arrows, not sheaf arrows. Now we go to the offensive fire phase. We check, I think the crossbows only fire to 2 hexes. Crossbows only fire to 2 hexes, so we have some crossbowmen here, but they are not, and we have crossbowmen here, and here, but they are only firing out 2 hexes, so they do not have targets in range yet. And yep, I see nobody else is in range. So that's the offensive fire phase. Now we go to melee. Nobody's adjacent, so there's no melee. Now we go to the English player rally phase. The English don't have anybody routed yet, so no attempts to rally. Now we go to the English command phase. They're going to attempt to change their orders. They don't want to change from stand. So they're not going to attempt to change those orders. Now they go to the movement phase. They're going to choose not to move. They're all in place. The best defensive terrain they're going to get here. Their combat phase. Again, so we go to defensive fire phase. Go back to the French. Still they have nobody in range. So there is no defensive fire from the French. Now we go back to English offensive fire. Now these longbowmen can actually fire again. They will. Let's see how devastating these longbows can really be. Actually, the longbowman up here, longbow P, is actually going to fire again at that same men-at-arms because that unit is the most threatening unit that is closest to it. So he's actually going to fire at this same hex, and they roll a 4, not enough to hit, so they just miss completely. I have to mark off another regular arrow box. Now we go down to the other longbowman from before. And he only has that stack, so he'll try again at the stack with Lahire leader unit. Oof, they roll a 10. Okay, so go in order here. Lahire is stacked with 1 infantry unit. Okay, so it was a 1, so the English rolled a 10 again. So that is a 1. On the B column, you go down to 10, it's a 1. And 1 is top combat unit, so it's not going to be the leader here, but we'll check for leader casualty afterwards. Top combat unit in the target hex suffers a step loss. All combat units in the hex check morale. So we know we're flipping over that infantry unit to its reduced side. Now its morale is 5, but it has the leader with it. So when he rolls for his morale check, yeah, see, he rolled a 2. -1 for the leader is 1. So he passes his morale check fine. Now, there was a step loss in the hex with Lahire. So leader casualties. Look under the rules section for leaders. A leader stacked with a combat unit or unit that are eliminated during melee is killed if no friendly units remain in the hex. We're not going to do... Oh, okay, that's the only... So then we to do one... Oh, yeah. So just taking losses with combat units in the same hex doesn't look like we have to do anything. And then I mark off another one of regular arrow boxes for English T. And that is English offensive fire. Go to melee, nobody adjacent. And then you go to attacking heavy cavalry units. The English have no cavalry at all in this battle. Then we go to the French rally phase. We do have a rally, so let's go through that process. We have a rally, so right here, let's do a rally. So we go here, the French have 1 unit that was routed earlier. So this is important. I missed it early on, and from what I've read online, others miss it too. So basically, I'll check later camera clarity here. But during the owning player's rally phase of each game turn, routed units within the command span of their leader or of their overall command leader and not in an enemy ZOC check morale. So you have to go through each of these as a condition to check. He's routed. He is within the command span of his leader, because Alençon over here has 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So way out to here in a big circle, 6 hex radius, units within that command span are eligible to rally. And he's not in an enemy ZOC, therefore he may rally. Oh, it's not a may. They do check. So they do check morale. So now how do we check morale? This is so once basic line is once routed units are outside their commander's command rate span and they're outside the overall commander's command span, they will basically sit in a routed state, and really you have to send a leader over there to try to rally them. Otherwise they just sit routed. They're on the board, but if they're not forced off the board, but they may sit on the board in routed state and essentially ineffective, essentially destroyed. Here's another rule often missed, it seems. Routed units forced to make a morale check have +1 added to their die roll. So in effect, in other words, their morale is 1 lower yet again. So on the reduced side, his morale is 5. He rolls, see he rolled an 8. And you have to add 1 to that because he's routed. That's 9, which is way over his morale rating, which means he failed. He does not rally. And if the result is greater than their morale rating, they continue to rout and are retreated 3 hexes. So in other words, he had to check for rally because he met the conditions. He failed his morale check, so now he must rout 3 more hexes. 1, 2, 3. Now because of Alençon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he's still within Alençon's command span 4 now, and if he's still in that command span next turn, he's eligible to roll for rally. So that is how you do that. Leaders stacked with units attempting to went off the screen, didn't I? There he is. So he went straight back 3 hexes. So the routed units now here, Alençon's here. A leader stacked with a unit trying to rally will subtract 1. Is it die roll modifier? Yeah, die roll modifier. Okay, so that was the French rally phase, and that is the end of the turn. I'll just advance the game turn marker 1 spot. Here's the game. The game comes with a game turn marker, but no game turn track. So I just used the hexes on the side of the board and just go right down the numbers using the last digit of the hex ID. So we're on turn 2, and let's get to through another turn. So we go back to the now we have an English longbow phase. At the start of the whole game turn, before the French player's half of the turn, there's an English longbow phase. So this is yet another opportunity for the longbows to fire. So again, we do it. Actually, the same fires and the same targets. So up here, again at the French men-at-arms, 6. I think that's probably a morale check. That is a morale check on column B of the fire table. So it's just a plain morale check. So that French men-at-arms has to do a morale check. No modifiers. His morale is 7. And he passes with a 4. He rolls a 4, which is well under his 7. So he passes the morale check. Now down here to the other English longbow, firing at the same Lahire stack. Yeah, they roll a 1, not even close enough to do anything. So that's the English longbow phase. I'll go ahead and mark some more ammunition off. Now this will be interesting. I mean, we're already 3 marks through 4 for each of those 2 for their regular arrows. So we'll see what happens when they run out of those regular arrows. Presumably they're just going to have to sit out a turn to replenish, I think, 2 arrows. We'll look at that in a minute. All right, so that's the English longbow phase. Obviously that English longbow phase is an extra added phase for these 100 Years' War battles. Those are not in all of the Royalist and Roundhead series. Now we go to the French command phase. We're not going to bother changing the commands yet for the French. I'm going to keep them the same battle plan. Attack on the left and advance with the other 3 battles. So no changes. French player movement phase. Everybody is still in command range. Nobody's out of command. Routed units, while they may wind up outside the commander's command span, they're not out of command. They're routed. Route state takes precedence, or does not. It's not cumulative. It's not route state and out of command. So everybody else is still in command. Also, should emphasize all these skirmish units. Skirmish units are basically never out of command, but they also don't follow command chits. And they also have some other limitations and weaknesses. Nobody's out of command. We go to the movement phase again. So now this battle here. Oh. Okay. Okay, so they're going to do another minimum 1 hex move. With their advanced command, so they moved at least 1 hex, and they ended 1 hex closer to the enemy. Dunois will do one more 1 hex move. And of course, Richemont back here with Joan of Arc still needs to slow roll because they're trying to figure out who's going to break through or have some success up here. So the 3 advanced battles with advanced commands, have done their part. Now, if Alençon might need to leave the routed unit behind and set his heavy cavalry up for a charge. In any case, these guys have to move. I should say the men-at-arms here. They have an attack command. They must move 1/2 of their movement allowance rounded up. His movement allowance 3, 1.5 rounded up is 2. He's going to have to move 2 anyways. He doesn't have a choice. So he'll go there instead. And now the heavy cavalry. Let's look. Yeah. See, actually, Alençon is going to go ahead and move forward with this heavy cavalry, and this routed unit's going to be left behind for now. Let's look at those heavy cavalry units in the attack command. Unlike other combat units, heavy cavalry, so that's Alençon and his heavy cavalry here, do not have a reduced strength side. Instead, they have charging and non-charging sides. When subject to an attack command, they may be flipped to their charging side if they pass a morale check during the initial command phase. I made this mistake before. If I want to charge this turn, I need to remember to make and pass a morale check during the initial command phase of the turn. And I'm just going to stick to it, so we missed that opportunity charging. So now they have to move a minimum of 1/2 their movement allowance, which is 6. So they have to move 3 anyways. So what they're going to do is they're going to go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then try to charge next turn if they survive. If they survive the hail of arrows there. So that is the French movement. We go to the French player combat phase. We start with English defensive fire. So we get a lot of firing here. A lot of firing, so again, it was my interpretation of the rules earlier, and I should say other rule sets in the series, that fire combat can be basically, you can choose your fire combats as you go one by one, with the one stipulation being that all fire combat in a single target hex must be resolved before resolving fire combat in any other hex. So you can choose your fires as you go unit by unit, but when you move on from another hex to another hex, you can't go back to a previous hex. That's how I interpret it. So here, what I'll do is going to fire the guy in the center against Alençon here, and then depending on what happens, I'll decide how I want to use the longbowman to the left and right of that center longbow unit. So first the longbow unit here against the target hex here. So now we're 2 hexes away. I think it's still B. It is still B. Still on the B column. He rolled an 8. That is enough for 1. So he causes a 1 step loss. So, okay, so this is the heavy cavalry. Heavy cavalry, to record the first step loss, place a 1 step loss marker. 1 step loss marker. There's a 1 step loss marker. So, place under the heavy cavalry unit, the unit has its combat strength, move allowance, and morale rating reduced by 1. So the 1 step loss marker is in effect a -1 to each of the heavy cavalry units' values. So when we look at the heavy cavalry there, his morale is now 6, his movement is now 5, and his combat strength is now 4 because of the 1 step loss marker underneath. Now he has to check for morale, and what we do is it's -1 for the 1 step loss marker, but it's +1 for Alençon in the same hex, so it's even. Ooh, not good. Yeah, so what I do is I roll an 8. I subtract 1 for Alençon being present, which is 7. But that's 1 more than its current morale of 6, because its printed morale is 7, -1 for the 1 step loss is 6. So he failed by 1, just 1 higher than 1 higher than what he needed to get. So he routes. Alençon goes with him. 1, 2, 3. And this is interesting. Yeah, I don't know how interesting it is actually, but we'll figure out his order later. Oh, I guess the order. I mean, leaders don't really route, so I guess technically it's the route marker is on. I'm still going to put the leader underneath, but the leader isn't technically routed, I think. Yeah, I think that's right. Now we go back to now the other longbows can choose their target. So the outside longbowman will fire at the other heavy cavalry at 2 hexes away. Oh wait, I need to subtract ammunition for that first one, which is English Q. English Q has fired 1. Okay, so that bowman rolled a 3. He misses, not enough. So on column B, you need at least a 5 to have any result. So now we go to the third longbowman over here. And here the target is 1 away. And here I think, because the target's 1 away, you want to look at using sheaf arrows. So what does that entail? So longbow units have 2 types of ammunition, regular arrows and sheaf arrows. Sheaf arrows are used when firing at 1 hex range. If a longbow unit runs out of sheaf arrows, it must fire on the B column if the fire is not out. Sheaf arrows may be fired at more than 1 hex range, but they are treated as regular arrows, and the range table column is used as normal. Yeah, what do sheaf arrows do? Okay, I guess they don't actually do anything. I don't see. So sheaf arrows just allow you to roll on the A column, I guess, is in effect the only result, because if you're out of sheaf arrows, and even though it says you roll on the A column, you actually roll on the B column. Okay, I guess that's what it means. So it is a sheaf arrow because he has sheaf arrows. So he's rolling on the A column at the French men-at-arms there adjacent. Ooh, he rolls a 1. So I'm going to erase that 1 sheaf arrow box. And, ooh, that was not good. That was a waste. Now we go, by the way, while I'm here, arrow units per se are not the only ones that can engage in ranged combat, depending on the scenario in the game. So in some of the games, your infantry, your infantry and other foot units, actually, or cavalry units, can also have fire capability with that asterisk. But in this particular scenario, it looks to me like the only ranged fire units happen to be the French crossbows and the English longbows. But that's just this particular scenario. The point being that you'll want to look for all of your fire-capable units, because sometimes they're not depicted as arrow-equipped soldiers on the counters. But anyways, we're done with our English ranged combat on the English right. So we go down the line, and we go all the way down to the English left, where we have several longbowmen right here. Looks like we have 2 longbows with targets in range. We'll go with start with the inside longbowman. The outside longbowman is going to fire at La Hire hex. 3 hexes away is the Bravo column. 1. Misses completely, but we erase one of those arrows. That's from English longbowman R. All right, now we go back to, now we're back to English T again. He has, I'm going to have him go ahead and fire, but he will then be out of regular arrows. So we'll see what we do with that. So 2 hexes away, Bravo column. He rolls a 5, which is just a morale check. Okay, so he rolled a 5. It's just a morale check. It's La Hire again with his reduced infantrymen. So again, roll the die. Oh, That's good. So he rolled a 2. Subtract 1 for being stacked with a leader is 1. So well under his morale, printed morale of 5. So that's good. The French pass that hail of arrows, and now we go to ammunition track, and English T is out of regular arrows. So I think he has 2 sheaf arrow boxes. So those can be used. Sheaf arrows may be fired at more than 1 hex range, but are then treated as regular arrows, and the range table column is used as normal. So basically, if he wants to fire now, short of replenishment, he's going to be wasting sheaf arrows because they will be treated as regular arrows at more than 1 hex range. Something like that. All right, so that is English defensive fire. Now we go to offensive fire. Now we have some French crossbows within range. Let's go the same way, top of the map down. All right, so we have crossbow, crossbow, and crossbow in range because they're 2 X's away. Now, let's start with the far left French crossbowman. He's firing at 1-2 hex range. Let's first go over some things. This French men-at-arms unit here does block line of fire through its hex. So let's see, because the line of fire runs along the hex side there, let's go ahead and review what is blocked and not blocked. So line of sight. Combat units firing at a range of 2 hexes or more may fire only at targets to which they can trace a line of sight. They must be able to see what they are firing at. Loss is traced from the center of the firing hex to the center of the target hex. If loss is blocked, fire is not possible. Combat units firing at enemy units on the same elevation, that's what we have here. The following block loss when firing and target units are at the same elevation. Combat units on the same elevation, hex of higher elevation, a wooded hex at the same elevation. So, the question is about the hex side. I thought that was covered somewhere. Maybe not. It's not covered. Completely not covered. So, since it does not appear to be covered, since it doesn't appear to be covered, I'm going to go more conservative and say that hex sides are included in the hex, and say that the line of sight is blocked. Yeah, I just can't remember what the other games in the series do with this. For now, we'll just say it's blocked, and we'll come back to that if we need to. So he actually doesn't have a target, so this crossbowman will fire at this one, at this English, what is that? Infantry, men-at-arms? Men-at-arms, I guess. English men-at-arms, okay? So French crossbow to English men-at-arms, and now we have the line of fire goes right over the hedgerow. So we go back to that terrain effects chart, and we look up the hedge hex side that we looked at earlier. Hedge hex side, go across to the combat effects, and fire is -1. So that is a die roll modifier. So -1 die roll modifier for terrain. So now we go back to the range table, crossbow, at 2 hex range is on the C column. Come down to the C column, and we see that we need at least a 7 to have a result, and we're going to subtract 1 from that roll for the hedge hex side. So he rolls a 5, minus 1. Yeah, minus 1 for the hex side is 4, which is not nearly enough to have any result, so misses. Now I go to the French, ammunition sheet, and I find Alençon E. Alençon E, and mark off the first arrow box on that tracker. Now we go to this crossbowman, crossbowman in the center here. He's going to fire at Talbot and his stack. 2 hex range is the C column, minus 1 for the hedge hex side there. He rolls a 3, minus 1 to 2. We know not enough to do any damage. He loses an arrow box. That's Lahire D. Lahire D. All right. So ineffectual French offensive fire phase. Now we go to the melee phase. We do have somebody. Now we have our first melee. Right here. So the French men-at-arms get to melee the English men-at-arms through the hedge hex side, which again is minus 1 for terrain. Now we'll do our first complete melee. We'll go through step by step here. For melee, during the melee combat, phasing player may attack enemy combat units located in the front hexes. So front hexes matter. See, the English men-at-arms are in the French 2 front hexes, and vice versa. The French is in the 2 front hexes of the English men-at-arms. Out of command, routed, and skirmish units may not initiate melee. More than one unit may attack an enemy combat unit. We only have 1 adjacent to 1 here. Melee requirements. A unit does not have to melee, exception, I think these guys in attack. 511. 511, yes. Combat units adjacent to enemy combat units must perform combat, either fire and or melee. That's us right now. We want to attack anyways, so, but it's mandatory as well. All combat units in the defending hex must be attacked as 1 unit. There's only 1 in the hex. In order to initiate melee, units must have an advanced stand or attack command. He has an attack. Ooh. Yeah, see, here is where we say that technically Alençon is not routed. Alençon is fine, and he has an attack command. So at this point, I will put the route marker underneath Alençon, but on top of the combat units that have routed. Melee procedure. The attacker announces which combat units are attacking and what enemy combat units will be meleeed. We only have 1 melee for this turn, but in the future we are going to mark those. I believe. I marked them before. Still debating whether the attacker needs to declare them all. Yeah, I'll deal with that later. We only have 1 here, right? The attacking combat units check their morale. So the French are initiating melee. The attacking combat units check their morale. Wow. So, well, that's what happens, right? So he rolled a 9, which is higher than his printed morale of 7. So he fails his morale check. If a unit fails this morale check, it does not rout, but neither does it attack. So basically, it just stalls, and it's over. But units which pass the morale check must attack. Now that does create a very interesting dynamic. Well, I'll talk about that later when it happens. Didn't happen here. The French came in contact, and they wanted to charge forward, burst through the hedge hex side, plow into the English men-at-arms, but instead, for whatever reason, the French men-at-arms, they got spooked and they just stalled. And that's that. So I'll have to wait for the next complete melee. And no heavy cavalry to do charges. English play a rally phase. The English still have no routed units to rally. Back to the English command phase. The English have no reason to change their commands. They'll stay at stand and stand. Movement phase, they have no reason to move yet. Nobody's been forced away from their positions or whatever. Combat phase. Now we have the French defensive fire phase. So we'll look at, we will fire actually the same crossbow attacks that we did last time. So French crossbow to English men-at-arms behind the hedge. We know it's C column. We know it's 3 minus 1 for the hedge is 2, which we know is too little to have any effect. Go ahead and mark Alençon E, another arrow box. And now we go down to La Hire D, firing at Talbot. Again, same target. There we go. He rolls a 10, minus 1 for the hedge hex side, but that's a 9. And let's see what a 9 for a crossbow on column C is a 1. So Talbot has the English men-at-arms stacked with him. He flips over as a step loss. Now he has to do a morale check. His printed morale is 5. Yeah, it's 1. Minus 1 for being stacked with the leader is 0, which is way under its printed 5. So he easily passes his morale check, but he is weaker for having received that hail of crossbows. Now we subtract 1 from La Hire D, and that is defensive fire. Now we go to English offensive fire. We definitely have fire here. Starting at the far English right here. So this one now English Q is going to fire at Alençon heavy cavalry out here at its max range of 3. 5, that's borderline. 5, that's a morale check. That is a morale check. So the Alençon heavy cavalry has a morale of 7. He rolls a 3, so he easily passes his morale check. And he's good. I'm going to subtract 1 from English Q. English Q. Alright. When I'm done here, we're going to look at arrow replenishment. So now English U fire at the same target. Still on column B. 2. Not even close. So English U loses 1 on the ammunition track, and now we go back to P, and P has 1 more sheaf arrow, and then he's completely, oh no, he has a regular arrow. So he'll use the second of 2 sheaf arrows to fire at the French men-at-arms who are adjacent. Yeah, so this is a sheaf arrow, which means he fires on the A column. Oh my, that's going to be devastating. So he rolled a 10. And because he's targets 1 hex away, and he has a sheaf arrow on the ammunition track, it's actually his last one. That's on the A column. Because you look up here, they should have an asterisk up here. That's what they should have. They should have an asterisk up here where they explain sheaf arrows. But anyways, at range 1, longbow is A column. Go down to the A column. Go down to 10. It is 2. 2-step losses in morale check. So, but he's eliminated. This is all in sewn. Boom. In one fell swoop, 2 steps. Flip him for 1 step. Second step, he's a goner. So that was major. Mark off that last sheaf arrow box, and English P is complete. Keep saying that. They have 1 regular arrow left. So, oh, wait a minute. Did I understand that correctly? What is the difference? If a longbow unit runs out of sheaf arrows, it must fire on the B column of the fire combat table when at 1 hex range rather than the A column. Yeah. Okay. Again, there should be an explanation of that on the range table. But anyways. Look at that again. All right, let's finish the English offensive fire. Then we'll talk about arrow replenishment. So over here on the English left, we again have the 2 longbowmen here firing at the same T and R. See, T is not going to fire. He's not going to waste. See, if he fires an arrow, he only has a sheaf arrow box, so he's wasting a potential A fire at an adjacent target. So let's just say he chooses not to fire, and we'll fire with R at 3 hex range, which is on the B column. It was a 7. It's probably a morale check. Yes, it is morale check. So the higher again. Oh, very bad. He rolls a 10. -1 for the leader's 9, which is way over his printed morale of 5. So he routs. He routs. 1, 2, 3. We place a route marker on him. All right. All right, so that's all English offensive fire. So talk about ammunition resupply. Players may replenish the ammunition of their longbow, crossbow, or bow units. In order to do so, a unit must neither move nor engage in combat for 1 friendly movement combat phase. If the unit has not moved and does not engage in combat in either combat phase, friendly or enemy, the unit replenishes 2 boxes on its ammunition track. Units may never replenish their ammunition beyond their initial supply. Infantry units may not replenish. Cannons may never replenish. Okay. Sheaf arrow boxes are always replenished first. So what we're saying is P did fire, I think, but T chose not to. So he didn't move, he didn't engage in combat. So I guess he replenishes 2 boxes. So I'll go ahead and on English T, I will erase the 2 marked boxes, which puts him down to only 2 used boxes. Okay, that's something to pay close attention to. So maybe something we want to mark something. Pull out some handy generic markers to make sure that we're actually tracking that closely. side. All right, and so then we go to melee. Nobody is adjacent. French rally phase. We definitely have some French rallying to do, so we will get to that rallying. Okay, so we'll go in order here. Obviously, back up here to the French left. Right here's Alençon. He is stacked with a heavy cavalry unit. So we look at the heavy cavalry. He has a printed morale of 7. -1 for the step loss is 6. Ooh, that's nice. He rolls a 1. -1 for the leader is 0, which is way under his 6. So he rallies. So we remove the route marker. Rallies, so remove the route marker. And now he is still in the fight. Now we go over here. This routed unit is now within 6 hexes of his leader, Alençon, and not in an enemy Zoc. So he can roll. His current morale is 5. Remember that we add... so we roll a 2. We add 1 because he's routed. We have to remember to do that up here, even though he rolled way low. So we add 1 because he is routed. Is 3, which is still under his printed 5. So he rallies. Take the route marker, remove the route marker. So now he stays reduced for the rest of the game. There is no repairing reduced units, but now he's back in the fight. Now he can start moving up again to yeah. He's going to be in command because he's still within command range. But he'll be heading back into the fight. And then we have, in the French center here, we have La Hire, routed unit. Okay, so we'll just roll first. Ooh, this will be close. So he rolls a 6. His printed morale is 5, -1 for being routed, +1 for the leader, cancels. So he's 1 too high, one more. So he continues routing 3. 1, 2, 3. And that's all the French rallying to do. That would be the end of game turn 2. We take our handy game turn marker and we advance it to turn 3. And we will catch you next time around.